Okay, so the Uncanny Valley of ML, I'm going to introduce it today. And if I do it well, you're going to walk away with more questions than I have answers. So sorry about that. But I'll cover templates for finding the Uncanny Valley and best practices for if you face it in your applications, how you can try to mitigate, avoid, step around, because stepping into it's not great. Alrighty, building block time. Human decision systems, we can model them very high level as information comes in, people process that information, have a think about it, and then make a decision. We'll be touching on how judges set bail, where they get information about folks that are in an arraignment trial, figuring out what bail should be. This doesn't capture even folks driving down the street. And my favorite one that's pertinent today is that you all had information about all the different conferences you could be at, and you decided to come to MLconf today. So if you pay attention to the news or science fiction, we'd love to consider that we're going to jump this spectrum from human decision systems to AI decision systems overnight. And some applications that will happen. But most likely, what will happen is we'll have an integration of machine learning to augment the decision making of the folks doing the work. And I think the first step of integrating ML is very much happening today across a broad spectrum of applications. And I'll leave it to the imagination of what happens after that. But I think we'll see the first one in our lifetimes, and it's dubious whether or not the second one will fully deliver what we think it could. OK. So when the ML is integrated into these human decision systems, it tends to follow a template. It's a very simple template. You give all the information to the ML. You give it all the previous decisions that people have made off of that information, train a model, and it makes a recommendation of what people would most likely do with that information. And now we also have the field of explainability in AI, giving us the feature A is high and giving us reasons for why ML is making those decisions. So the chain of accountability is not broken. That person still gets full access to the information. They are still on the hook for the decision they make. What is the pressure that's causing us to force smashing ML into these systems? And it follows another very standard template. We have an increasing amount of data, and we have a decreasing cost of ML. This is making our ML, AI, data science, whatever you want to call it, much better and cheaper. The other side of it is that we have an increasing number of decisions, either through population growth. The world's population has grown by 60% since I was born. And at the same time, we have fewer experts graduating in older fields. Folks are less inclined to spend their entire lives becoming experts in some of these critical fields. So the combination leads executives and people overseeing these systems to think, OK, I've got these pressures. Machine learning is getting better. The ratio of decisions per person is getting much higher and more costly. I'll introduce machine learning. And the theory is that if machine learning is wrong, if it's bad, people will ignore it. But then as machine learning gets better and better and increases its accuracy, the overall system accuracy will increase. And in fact, because it's providing that recommendation up front, the average processing time for folks will go down. And if that was the case, this would be a really short talk. This is where we get the Uncanny Valley of ML. That as ML approaches human accuracy and we smash it into a human decision system, system performance degrades. In fact, we get decreasing accuracy and we get increasing time per decision. OK, that's the Uncanny Valley of ML. Can we go find one? Here's a template for finding an Uncanny Valley of ML. First, you have to have a human decision system that you understand well enough that you have ground truth labels and you can measure what that human accuracy and speed is. That is a very hard thing to ask of some systems. But let's say we have that. From that baseline, then we can take those ground truth labels and perturb them. If we have 10 ground truth labels and we modify one of them to be incorrect, suddenly we have an ML with 90% accuracy. And in this way, we can simulate the different levels of ML accuracy. So the next step is then to integrate the two systems. And you have to let it run for a little while. You have to let people climatize to the new system. They have to get used to how much do I trust that ML. And then you can measure the system accuracy and the speed as a function of ML accuracy. OK, So let's go have a bit of fun with this. Back in grad school, when we wanted to test out neural nets at Cornell, the grad students would go around the entire building, empty out all the kitchens of all the coffee mugs, bring them into the office, and litter them around, and ask the robot to go count how many coffee mugs there were. So let's turn the tables around a little bit, and let's ask people to go label coffee mugs. So I've got 100 photos with a ground truth label of how many coffee mugs are in that image. And I can perturb that to simulate different levels of ML accuracy. And this is the UI with your nice friendly image of coffee mugs. The ML suggestion of it suggests that there are 5 coffee mugs. Is the suggestion correct? And if not, then go to the work of finding out how many coffee mugs are in the image and entering it. And I threw this against Mechanical Turk. Ideal results again. We would love for folks to say, OK, you know what? ML accuracy is really high, I trust ML, and the accuracy will improve. But if I spot that ML has made a mistake, then I'll go ahead and fix it. So our accuracy should just stay positive and in fact go up. And because I'm getting that quick bootstrap of how many coffee mugs are in that image, then my time should go down. Right? That would be nice. What did we actually find? What we actually found was that as the simulated ML accuracy approached human accuracy, which is 94% for these 100 images of coffee mugs, there's some really tricky ones in there, the overall system actually went down. And in fact, I wasn't expecting to be able to measure this, but the time also went up. What's going on? Do people want machines to be long? Do they see the ML recommendation and say, no, machines couldn't possibly get it, I'm going to put in some other number? Are they being lazy? No, they're not being lazy. They, in fact, corrected machine learning when machine learning was right. And does this boil down to how much we trust machines? Are we fighting with machines when they give us recommendations? OK, so coffee mugs are cute. Let's go to something that's a bit harder. OK, the judicial system. The judicial system is following the exact same template. They've got increasing amounts of data coming from electronic records and also the linking of those records across states, across social media. And you've got a decreasing cost of ML. The other side of it is you do have a bizarrely increasing number of decisions by more and more folks being incarcerated. And you, in fact, have fewer folks graduating from law school. That dip there is the 2008 recession. So there's more and more pressure to introduce machine learning into the judicial system, and that's exactly what's happening. One of the places that has the biggest pressures is Estonia. They have a limited population where a large chunk of that population is already maximally employed, and they're facing increasing amounts of work in their judicial systems. So they actually have a very progressive approach to adding ML to their systems, and their goal is to get to the point where a robot judge could, in fact, automatically settle disputes under $8,000 with no intervention. France wants to follow suit, and one that's a bit happier is that a little chatbot managed to overturn 160,000 parking tickets. And the image on the right is worth calling out. That is, in fact, a real set of printouts of the Compass score in Cleveland. And those are scores that are handed over to the judge there, recommending or setting a risk score of low, medium, high of how risky it is to let someone out on bail. OK, it gets even closer. So in California, 49 of the 58 counties already use a pretrial assessment system. This is essentially a black box that also returns low, medium, high risk scores. And yes, San Francisco is one of them. And in fact, SB 10 that passed a couple years ago was in fact slated to come into effect in October of this year, where it would be required that all counties use a black box for helping speed up their bail processing. But there was a referendum. Oddly enough, I'm in agreement with this one, but it was by a strong lobbying group of bail bondsmen who decided, you know what, this is bad for our business, and they have a referendum coming out on the 2020 ballot. So just a sec, doesn't matter. this is the hard question, and I'm going to send it out as a proxy to other people who have thought about it far longer than I have. And it matters to the point that it's included in the Bill of Rights. So this has been a problem for a very long time. And it matters in the sense that even John Oliver did a nice segment on how pretrial detention increases the rate at which people take plea agreements, regardless of their circumstances with the charges, and in fact increases the length of sentence and increases the overall court fees as well. So, and then the population is, this is a very sizable population facing these problems. Okay, great. Let's go take this complex situation and let's go smash a machine into it. For finding an Uncanny Valley of ML on this one, I didn't have access to the entire system. So here's another template when you're dealing with really complex systems. Can you find an Uncanny Valley when all you can do is work on one label at a time? Here's the template. Take a real case and simulate different UIs, different model results. And if you can influence the overall system behavior of what that label results largely enough, then you know you have influence on the ML coming into the system, and you are susceptible to a system decay of adding ML in. So I went ahead and took a real case. This one was brought to the press. This one became of public interest when ProPublica revealed that the black boxes have quite a bit of bias in them. I'm specifically going to look at these black boxes are bad for everyone. This is Britta Borden. She essentially, the way I summarize it is she was a high schooler and she took a bike for a joyride for a couple of blocks, which counts as felony theft, and was assigned a compass score of high risk because she had 4 previous juvenile misdemeanors. She was unemployed. She was a high school student. And her friends were also unemployed. She was a high school student. But the model doesn't separate that out. Those were the features that represented her in the system. And that system labeled her as a high risk. This resulted in her being set with a $1,000 bail and spending some time in jail. So that's the real case. It's uplifting, I know. We're going to take perturbations of that. We're going to try different ML UIs, and we're going to try different explainability. We'll include examples where why she should be released on bail is put up with the ML score, and reasons why she should not be released on bail is put up with justifying the ML score. Okay, how did it shake out? This is from over 400 surveyed participants. The first row is if there's no ML in the system and they just get the straight facts, and that lines up with what happened. Is the most common response is $1,000 bail, and that's exactly what happened. Then, with no explanation, we have ML of low risk, medium risk, and high risk. High risk was actually what happened, and you can see that 14% increase in bail being denied, and that lowering of $0 bail as well. So just including, with no explanation, the recommendation from machine learning of a negative action, people are more predisposed to taking it. But the big call out is that ML, where we put in high risk, remember, it suggested high risk, so if it's going to suggest a negative action, it should probably include the negative features that suggested that action, dramatically increases the rate at which no bail would have been provided. Or, sorry, the official term is bail denied. Okay, so that's folks on Amazon Mechanical Turk. Now, one of the arguments I hear frequently is, well, we need to educate people about how machine learning works. And then if they understand how ML works, they'll be more, they'll be happier to override ML recommendations. Okay, so I polled folks from my network. There's a book going out to some lucky winner. These are 100 folks from my network. They have a baseline understanding of ML to they teach and actively research in this field. And we do see that overall, the group is more forgiving, but we still see that sudden shift of when you provide ML with a negative recommendation and the features that support that negative recommendation, a dramatic change in the label that is applied. Okay, and while we're here, I'm just going to point out some other fundamental flaws with the judicial implementation is it's literally coded in the law that it has to say low, medium, or high. There's no uncertain or not enough data category. And if you take Britta Borden's stats and you go over to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and enter it, that site will actually give you a flag and say, we do not have enough information to make a judgment call here. So another flaw in designing ML is you have to design the escape hatch in these systems. The other aspect that is, I wonder how much ML they have in these rooms when they're deciding what happens, is that they would not measure the effectiveness of the system until 2023. And I cannot imagine a single one of us releasing ML in any of our production systems and saying, you know what, I'm going to wait 4 years to see if it's doing well. OK, the Uncanny Valley of ML. Did you think I was going to get through an entire talk with the Uncanny Valley and not reference the Uncanny Valley of AI? It's coming. OK, here we go. The Uncanny Valley of AI, it was brought up in 1970, and it corresponds to, I think everyone's familiar with it, of robots, movies, the human representation that when it's completely unrealistic, it's cute, and then as it gets closer and closer to being human, we like it more and more. But as soon as it gets really close to human, but not quite, then all of your metrics tank, and you have to get onto the other side of being so believably human that people begin to relate to you again. Folks have been asking for decades, why does the Uncanny Valley of AI exist? And these are the primary theories from, largely psychology has been researching it. And they've come up with, it's a mismatch between expectations and observations. And that triggers a response in our brain that doesn't respond well to it. Difficulty of classifying objects that are between boundaries of categories. And then the ambiguity of the presence of the threat. But they've had decades to understand why the Uncanny Valley of AI exists, and we're still entertaining the, we still don't know exactly even when it does exist. OK, so let's go into the Uncanny Valley of ML, and let's throw some additional theories onto things that should be tested. If I have a scapegoat, if I have a machine that I know is making a bad decision that I want to make because I'm biased towards that bad decision, is that enabling people to be more biased in these systems? There is a friction in a lot of fields between people and machines. And when we introduce machines to these systems, do we want the machines to be wrong? And then the other side of it is that we have to take a step back and look at how we've actually fundamentally changed the system. We did it on the left in the human decision. They're trained to take information and make a decision. When we add a computer in there, we're actually adding another decision that they need to make. They need to decide whether or not they agree with the machine, and we haven't trained them for that. So that is complicating the space as well. And the other thing I want to use as a thought experiment for understanding why this exists is to lean on the field of team research. What they do is they take folks and they have a task and they bring them together and they research the conditions under which you can bring people together so that they can accomplish that task better or worse. And the thought experiment from there is, imagine you have a great expert who's used to making decisions rapidly and accurately, and you add someone in and you say, OK, every decision you make, you need to converse with this person, but by the way, they're just slightly worse than you are. That act of having to have that conversation, we see it with the Mythical Man Month. Anyone that works on building teams understands that you have to differentiate when it's best to have a one person versus two. And I think that helps explain to me intuitively why the Uncanny Valley exists. OK, so crossing the chasm, best practices. Self-driving cars, I saw this one coming and it cringed on the back of my teeth of self-driving cars were headed for the Uncanny Valley when they set the expectations that they would have the car driving most of the time, and then when the car didn't know what to do, then it would change over controls to the person. Right, so the car's deciding you should be going 60 miles an hour straight, you're gonna, the nice thing that they did was that Volvo did a simulation where they simulated that type of system. They gave iPads to executives where whenever the ML wasn't certain about how the car should drive, it would bing the executive and say, OK, quick, what do you do with the car? And it convinced the executives enough that they're like, wait, just a second, we are not going to walk into this uncanny valley. And so they actually pulled back, and they set their sights to be on the other side of the uncanny valley. Another thing to figure out whether or not you're facing the uncanny valley, which side of it you're on, how deep it is, how wide it is to use simulators. We use simulators in so many critical systems, from landing folks on the moon to nuclear power plants. When we want to design the integration of ML and human decision systems, let's go ahead and build into the roadmap, build the simulation, and figure out what the actual deliverables of ML should be in that space. Another, these are hacks to get around it, is repurpose the hot dog or not. Is ML is designed in one system may in fact work much better in another. The trick from the Uncanny Valley of AI is to reset expectations. Is that just by changing the proportions on the heads, they reset your expectations that you're not going to see people. And in similar ways, I think we can learn from that in setting expectations for machine learning. And the last one is relabel bad labels. We know that there are bad labelers in the system. We can find that by throwing ML across the system, finding where ML disagrees, and putting those labels against a panel of experts that can give us additional insights into how we should be modifying past labels so that future labels are of higher quality. Okay, and the last way you can avoid the uncanny valley is, well, the first time I released the coffee mug example, I didn't get anything. People didn't pay attention to the ML at all. So that's your last way to avoid the uncanny valley, is release ML that people don't pay attention to. Okay, and for folks that want a little bit of a stick of why you should pay attention to the uncanny valley, is some projects have fallen into it. The IBM case, if you read the actual examples where they didn't like what was happening, it was senior doctors that said the result was plausible, but would lead to a detrimentally negative outcome for the patient that a junior physician wouldn't feel comfortable or knowledgeable enough about on overriding the ML there. And then, of course, we have the courtrooms. France has actually made it up to 5 years in prison if you calculate judicial statistics on specific judges. So you could have some legal modifications may become barriers. So if you release a product into the uncanny valley and you cause harm in these systems, they will kick you out. Okay, so I hope this has raised a few questions, because I don't have a lot of answers to things I would really like to know the answer to. And I can see different fields beginning to approach understanding what are the best practices, how do we measure these complex systems. HCI, team research, data science, psychology, user research, and specific applications are all getting wound up into this problem. But they're doing it independently, and they're doing it slowly. And this is giving me a deja vu of data science 10 years ago. And if we bound together folks that are working on this common idea of ML integration, then we'd get much more rapid development, possibly in time, to give us insights into the systems we're changing today. So to bootstrap a new field of research, I've created a Venn diagram, which is how we did it for data science, right? And a couple of initial questions. And it is going to have to involve some concept of team research. Folks that can understand when you bring multiple entities together to make decisions, how does that system work? We need them ML and data science. I don't know if I've fully convinced you that SB10 has some lacking knowledge on ML, but we need to bring more ML folks into this space. And the last is politics. A lot of these systems are large. They have lots of regulations behind them, and you have to be able to navigate that to even get access to the data. And the last call to action is, I've seen this story too many times. We have incredible technology, and it's causing harm to girls. We've seen it with image recognition. We've seen it with ads for housing. We've seen it in medical studies. And I had to think about it. And I don't think we can fix all of this overnight, but I think there's actually one really simple thing that we could actually implement in the next quarter. If we decided to draw a line and say that in these systems, we are not going to let them hurt vulnerable parts of the population any more than they already are. And that actually falls into the paradigm of guardrail metrics. Guardrail metrics are used in our infrastructure, and they are designed to set the bounds of what is acceptable business behavior. And my call to action on this is, could we please add guardrail metrics to protect the vulnerable parts of our populations when ML is being integrated into these complex systems? Thanks.